Am I the asshole for refusing to marry my pregnant girlfriend after discovering the truth? Before I dive into this situation, I want to give a little background about myself because I think it'll help paint the picture of why I'm so conflicted right now. I'm 17, still in high school, and I've always been someone who's had a pretty clear vision for my future. I've got dreams, man. I've been saving up for my first car since I was 14, and after I graduate, I planned on working with my uncle in construction, learning the ropes, and eventually starting my own business down the road. Life seemed simple, exciting, and full of possibilities. Until recently, when everything flipped upside down. A few weeks ago, my girlfriend Sophie, 19, told me she's pregnant. We've been dating for almost 2 years, and for the most part, things were good. Sophie's a college student, she's in her second year of nursing school, and I always admired how determined and ambitious she seemed. She was the first girl I seriously dated, and I fell for her quickly. There was something about the way she carried herself that drew me in. It felt like she had her life figured out. I loved that about her. But lately, things have taken a turn I wasn't expecting. When Sophie told me she was pregnant, I had no idea how to react. I'm still a teenager. I haven't even graduated yet, let alone started a career or figured out my life. Sophie, on the other hand, was calm. Almost too calm. She immediately started talking about our future together, about how we'd make things work, how she'd balance school and the baby, and how I'd step up as the father. I was overwhelmed. The way she was talking made it sound like she had been preparing for this moment, while I was still trying to wrap my head around the fact that I was going to be a dad at 17. But that wasn't the only surprise. As we sat on her bed, Sophie turned to me and said, "We should get married before the baby comes." I just stared at her, blinking. Marriage? At 17? I hadn't even thought about marriage at all, let alone in the middle of high school. I didn't have a job, a stable income, or even a plan for how I was going to afford a car. How was I supposed to be ready for marriage and a baby? It all felt like too much, too fast. Sophie, though, wasn't fazed. She kept going, talking about how it was the right thing to do and how getting married would make sure our child was born into a stable family. She said her parents had already discussed it with her and they agreed that marriage was the best course of action. It felt like she had already made up her mind, and I was just expected to fall in line. I told her I needed time to think. I wasn't trying to be a jerk, but I was honest with her, I'm just not ready for marriage. I still don't even know what I'm going to do after high school, and marriage is a huge commitment. I tried to explain that I loved her and I wanted to be there for the baby, but that rushing into marriage wasn't the answer. She said she understood, but I could tell she wasn't happy with my hesitation. Over the next few days, the pressure started building. Every time we talked, Sophie brought up marriage. She kept saying it was the responsible thing to do and that if we were going to have a baby together, we should do it the right way. It felt like she wasn't even considering my feelings about it. She would casually mention wedding plans like they were already set in stone, and any time I pushed back or tried to explain why I wasn't ready, she'd get frustrated. The real kicker came when Sophie's parents got involved. Now, Sophie comes from a very traditional family, her parents are conservative, and they have strong beliefs about what's right and wrong. When they found out she was pregnant, their immediate reaction was that we needed to get married, no questions asked. Her mom called me and told me, flat out, that if I was serious about Sophie, I'd marry her. I didn't know what to say. Her dad chimed in too, saying that they were willing to help us financially if we went through with the wedding. They even offered to help us get an apartment after the baby was born. At first, it sounded like they were being supportive, but then I realized they were using their financial help as leverage. It wasn't about making sure Sophie and I were okay, it was about making sure we did what they thought was right. They were trying to guilt me into agreeing to something I wasn't ready for, and that's when I really started to feel trapped. Every time I saw Sophie, it was the same conversation over and over again. She'd cry, telling me that we needed to be a family, that I was being selfish for not agreeing to marry her, and that if I really loved her, I'd want to do this for her and the baby. She made it sound like my reluctance to jump into marriage meant I didn't care about them, which couldn't be further from the truth. I care about Sophie, and I want to be a good dad to our child, but I also want to make sure we're making decisions for the right reasons. I didn't want to rush into something as serious as marriage just because we were scared or felt pressured. It wasn't long before Sophie started turning the guilt up a notch. She'd say things like, "What kind of father doesn't want to marry the mother of his child, or do you want people to think you're just going to leave us?" It felt manipulative, like she was using the baby as a bargaining chip to get what she wanted. She even started threatening to raise the baby without me, saying things like, "If you're not going to commit to me, how can I trust you'll commit to being a father?" It was like she was trying to back me into a corner, forcing me to choose between marrying her or being shut out of my own child's life. One night, after another argument about marriage, Sophie dropped the bomb that really changed everything. She told me that she had been planning this pregnancy for a while. Apparently, she had stopped taking birth control without telling me because she thought having a baby would bring us closer together. She admitted it like it was no big deal, as if I should have known all along. I was furious. I felt betrayed and manipulated. She had taken away my ability to make decisions about my own life, and now she was trying to use the baby as a way to lock me into a future I hadn't agreed to. I started to see Sophie in a completely different light. This wasn't the girl I fell in love with, this was someone who was willing to lie and manipulate me into getting what she wanted. And her parents, whether they knew it or not, were enabling her behavior by pushing for marriage so hard. I tried talking to my parents about everything. They've always been supportive of me, and I knew I could trust them to give me honest advice. When I told them about Sophie's confession, they were shocked. My mom was livid. She couldn't believe that Sophie would be so deceitful, and she warned me that marrying her under these circumstances would be a huge mistake. My dad agreed, telling me that I needed to think about my future and not let anyone, not even Sophie, pressure me into making a decision I wasn't ready for. They both told me that it was okay to wait, that being a good father didn't mean rushing into a marriage I wasn't prepared for. My mom said, "Just because you're having a baby doesn't mean you need to get married. You can be a great dad without being trapped in a relationship that isn't right for you." Her words hit me hard. I had been so focused on doing the right thing that I hadn't considered the possibility that getting married might not be the best choice for anyone, me, Sophie, or the baby. But even with my parents' support, I was still torn. I loved Sophie, or at least I thought I did, and part of me wanted to believe that we could make it work. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that our relationship was built on control and manipulation, not love and trust. And now that Sophie had admitted to tricking me into this situation, I wasn't sure if I could ever trust her again. The next time Sophie brought up marriage, I finally told her the truth. I said I wasn't going to marry her, at least not right now. I explained that I was still committed to being a father and supporting her and the baby, but that rushing into marriage wasn't the answer. I told her I needed time to finish school, get a job, and make sure we were both in a stable place before we made such a huge commitment. She didn't take it well. She accused me of abandoning her and the baby, saying that I was being selfish and immature. She cried, yelled, and told me that I was ruining her life. She even threatened to leave and take the baby with her, saying that if I wasn't going to marry her, she didn't know if she could trust me to be there for the baby at all. It was a heartbreaking conversation, and I could see that Sophie was genuinely upset. But I also knew that I couldn't let myself be manipulated anymore. I stood my ground and told her that while I wasn't ready for marriage, I was still committed to being a good father. I told her that we could co-parent and figure things out as we went, but that I wasn't going to let her pressure me into a decision I wasn't ready for. Sophie's parents were furious when they found out. They called me and my parents, accusing me of abandoning Sophie and saying that I was ruining their family's reputation. They even tried to convince my parents to pressure me into marrying her, but my mom shut that down quickly. She told them that I was doing the responsible thing by thinking about my future and not making decisions out of fear or guilt. Now, things are incredibly tense between Sophie and me. We're still talking, but our relationship is strained, and I'm not sure if we'll make it through this. I'm committed to being there for my child, but I don't know if I can stay in a relationship with someone who has been so deceitful and manipulative. The more I think about it, the more I realize that marrying Sophie would have been a huge mistake. So here I am, trying to figure out if I'm the asshole in this situation. Should I have just gone along with it for the sake of the baby, even if I wasn't ready? Or am I right to stand my ground and wait until we're both really prepared for such a huge commitment? I feel like I'm doing what's best for everyone in the long run, but the pressure from Sophie and her family is making me second-guess myself. Am I the asshole for refusing to marry my pregnant girlfriend, or am I just trying to do what's best for our future?